Lee, I am just thrilled to be able to do this interview with you. You were really one of the earliest influences in my career, in my perspective, and all my future dialogue and work when it came to really understanding a bit. I mean, to this day, I'm still learning, but a bit about the birth first mother's experience in the world. And I remember when I was introduced to you at an American Adoption Congress decades ago, that I was told that you were really the person who took this to another level and authenticated the information in a way that had not been done before. And my understanding was that you were at the University of New Hampshire. Is that correct?
Yes, I taught there for a while.
And what were you teaching when you were there?
I taught, well, goodness, that's a while ago, but it was something on the lines of human growth and development, which I subsequently kept on teaching. And I don't think that was the name at the beginning, because
That's
we're
all right. The
way
top.
back in 1976
Uh,
or, between 76 and 86. So that's a long time ago now.
yes, it is. We're both in those ages where we think about decades past, don't we?
We, we do.
So when you were there, did you do some research? What brought you into the world of adoption? Can you tell us a little bit about your history?
Well, what brought me into the world of adoption, kicking and screaming, because it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, was my personal experience of losing my son and being told I would forget it.
Mm.
And so help me God, I did. I put it right out of my mind and closed the door and put bars over the doors and just looked. I was terrified of looking back.
Mm.
But your mind will have its way. It wants wholeness.
Mhm.
So 10 years later, I woke up and said, what a bunch of crap this is.
Mm.
But I thought I was the only Looney Tune and that I had forgotten. So I didn't think it would be important to anybody else. But I needed to test that. So the Boston Globe had a Sunday insert that they called confidential chat. And that's where people wrote in anonymously to other people who were reading the newspaper and gave recipes for food and recipes for life.
Mm.
And I said, I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this, but I haven't forgotten. And do you feel that same way, or do you think I'm really, irretrievably gonzo? And I was just inundated with people who said, thank God somebody's asking that question. And so that emboldened me to take the first step. And I didn't have far to walk because there were other people who were reading that, writing to me, or just being in the background. And they said, let's do it. Let's have an organization. Let's tell people that we don't want to be anonymous, that we were sold a bill of goods, and we are real, we are authentic, and that's what excuse me, that's what we strove to do during our first years. We all were birth mothers. Some of them were adoptees and birth mothers,
Mhm.
parents and birth mothers, but we were there together with each other, holding hands. I'm reminding of that image of witches who held hands and walked into the water rather than to turn on each other. And that's kind of what we were. We did a lot of magical things that had to be orchestrated by somebody or something beyond us, pushing us all the way.
Wow. And this was all local at that time? This was just in where you were in New Hampshire?
And no, this was local to Boston.
To Boston. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's where we held our first meetings. And people, that was kind of centrally located, and so people could go to Boston by a train or bus or car or however it was that they could get there. So that was our time. What a time it was.
What years would that be, Lee?
1976 is when we founded Cub. And when we did it, it was like so fast. Everything happened very, very fast. We had our first meeting in July of 76. And we were incorporated by October of 76.
Wow.
Mm.
So Concern United Birth Parents started in Boston, and you tapped into a need and got a very fast response, clearly. And these would largely have been women who relinquished newborns?
Yes, but also other ages. But my focus, my personal focus, because that was my personal experience, was mothers of newborns.
Okay.
And a lot of that whole thing, when I opened myself up, a lot of that whole thing was just stunning things, probably as you experienced, kind of mind-blowing. That they were also birth mothers who'd surrendered 1 or 2 children, and I didn't think that was possible. Then I found out that with the advantage of time, they were able to say they were trying to do it right this time.
Mm.
They were trying to make up for that, and they thought, well, I could be hoodwinked with 1, but I'm not going to be hoodwinked with 2. But they were. So
yes,
swept up in the whole baby scoop era, as Karen says.
yes, yes.
Scooped up, absolutely scooped up.
And these were all very closed adoptions. They weren't clear where their children went.
I had no idea.
Did they know whether they had boys or girls? Did they have any sense of what had happened to them, or were they kind of numb?
They weren't numb. They were like in the early stages of thawing out.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And it was, and they didn't know what had happened to them. They didn't have the words to express what had happened to them. They were like, the cartoon character with a circle that goes on when they're bopped by the side of the head. And we were all kind of like that. And it was stunning for us to find a word. And, oh yeah, that's the word, that. And so language is really important.
Yes.
But so we have that, because language was used against us in words like, if you really love your child, you will give your child to someone who is more advanced in the methods and the ways and means of taking care of a child. So words were used to tie our hands behind our back, and we had already sinned greatly by having a child. And so when we were able to find our own words, that was very important on the road, on the journey. Very important.
What were some of those words you found, Lee?
Well, birth mother, to celebrate, I know that there's a big to-do about that nowadays, but it was so clear to us that we didn't want to be natural mothers, because that would mean adoptive parents would be unnatural mothers. we didn't want to be first mothers because then that took away from Native Americans who were
Oh,
first. So there was an awful lot. So, and that just fit what our experience was. Another word was surrender.
yeah.
You know, that we had had all the guns trained on us and we surrendered. We didn't have our own arsenal
Yes.
to fight that whole thing. So those are two very important words for us to take off with. Now, if people are using different words, that's fine, but we needed something that we could agree on as a tribe.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and that word surrender was just so powerful for all of us to understand, that whole thing. I give up. I not only give up, I give up on myself. It was such a powerful word.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, my son wasn't surrendered until he was 3 months old. And I spent that 3 months with my social worker she would push the surrender paper across to me and I would push it back and she would push it across. And we had that dance for 3 months.
Oh,
But finally I did. I surrendered. Uncle, I gave in.
and were there fathers involved in this group or just mothers?
Especially fathers who had married the mothers, which was a bizarre thing to me since my son's father had, I thought at the time, denied paternity and was not involved in my search or not involved in my awakening and not involved in my anything like that. So for a birth father to come forward and claim his child out loud was amazing to me. But yes, there were some birth fathers, and as I said, they were inspired to come because their wife was going through this, and now they had to make up, for what they had done. So
Now, at some point, wasn't there a similar organization formed for birth fathers, or am I not getting that right in my brain?
there was quite a while later, there was an attempt to form group. John Claren was a birth father who was active in later day Cub. I don't think he had a group as such. I don't know that fathers are that group oriented on psychological issues and like that. Yeah.
Now, you must have suffered an awful lot of pushback. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I mean, did you suffer pushback? From whom? How was that dealt with?
The first thing that comes to my mind was that I went to the Home for Unwed Mothers, Florence Crittenden Hastings house in Brighton, Mass, which is outside of Boston. And well, once I started to find my words, nobody could shut me up.
Okay.
I was always looking for venues to have words with people. So I went to the Florence Crittenden Hastings house and I was sitting around a conference table with all of these social workers. And I told them about my experience there and my experience generally and what my sentiments were at that time, 10, 15 years later. And when I left the room, I forgot my pocketbook. So I retraced my steps and I went to the doorway. And there I heard one social worker say to another one, "She is a dangerous woman."
Whoa. Wow. Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't feel powerful enough to be dangerous. I picked up my pocketbook and tiptoed back out the door. So it was that kind of thing. But I gotta say, I had BJ, Annette Barron, Reuben Panner, Arthur Sorowski, those early greats. When I started to communicate with people, I drew a very wide circle to include the social workers. I'm a big inclusivity fan. And they were so helpful to me and encouraging to me. They were the wind at my back.
Oh, that is because really Annette Barron and Reuben Panner, who, you know, for those watching have since passed, but
Yeah.
incredible researchers and writers, social workers here in California. And
Yeah.
B.J. Lifton, an adopted person, a phenomenal writer about her life experiences. So you really did you have any adoptive parents who got behind you?
I had one, her name was Carol Gustafson, and she was such a dear. She helped me to frame for myself my own experience. Like there was parts of me, and this part of me did this, and this part of me feels that. And so I saw all those splits in me, and what my job was to integrate it all. So that was, they were all so helpful. I remember Annette Barron, I mean, she just had her hand at my back. BJ, Betty Jean Lifton, had a summer home in Truro on Cape Cod.
I've been there, yeah.
Where I physically lived in Brewster.
Wow.
So I and another birth mother went many times to BJ's house on Cape Cod, and she was very helpful and encouraging, in fact, insistent. She could be insistent.
Yes, she could. I can remember her calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes and waking me up. I'd say, it's earlier here in California, BJ. I have to talk to you. It's important. She was very insistent. May she rest in peace. Yeah.
Yes. Oh gosh. What a treasure she was. I feel so fortunate to have met those early pioneers, and we were so unknowing.
Yeah.
And we really helped each other to find our missing pieces and find words, as I said. And it was truly a mutual help group.
Tell me about some of those splits or missing pieces. Can you be more definitive about what it is you had to integrate, Lee?
Well, I absolutely had to integrate my identity as a mother who had a child missing in adoption.
Okay.
That was not something I could tell anybody, not even my dearest friend, who continues to be a dear friend on Cape Cod. She and others, I mean, how do you tell somebody who knows you in one certain way that you have a huge chunk of your life that they don't know about? And that is, or was at that time, considered extremely shameful.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the part of you that was shameful, the part of you who wanted to throw off that manacle. You know, there was the part of you that ached, longed for some news of your child, and the part of you that was moving on. There were so many variant and contradictory pieces that we had to integrate. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. That's really very helpful. Tell me a little bit more about Concern United Birth Parents. It started in Boston. I know now, I mean, there's regional conferences in my own backyard here in Southern California. I know there's national conferences. I know it's very inclusive because I frequently will suggest to adoptive parents or social workers or adoptees or other birth parents to go because they learn so much in those environments. So how did it get to be this big national organization?
There was such a hunger for it. There was absolutely a hunger. I'm thinking of Carl Jung, who early disciple of Sigmund Freud, and he was all about becoming whole.
Yes.
And there was this drive to be whole, and people were saying, yeah, that's important. That's a huge part of my life, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to tell my parents, whom I gave them this song and dance about how I was going to be going to school, and I wasn't. I was really in a home for unwed mothers. A lot of backtracking and telling of truths. And that was extremely hard for many people. It certainly was hard for me. Yeah.
And so the need was there, and so it just kind of took off like fire across the country.
It really did. My first person was like 3 months after we had started Cub. Her name is Sandy Musser.
I know Sandy, sure.
Yeah. And she was in Pennsylvania at the time, and Adoption Forum with Penny Partridge was having their annual conference. And she asked me if I would come and speak. And she said that she was a birth mother, and she started our first branch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Pennsylvania. Then at that conference, I also met a woman named Charlene Justice, who you may not have ever heard of.
No.
I don't know. She was amazing, and she wanted to help other women who are currently pregnant to avoid that trap. And so she became our first Cub sister. And started that little. So we had all these little ways that we were going to be helping people over time. And they announced themselves, the women announced themselves, the ways that they could help announced to themselves. And I was just agog, because it was not anything that I was orchestrating necessarily. It was like the earth and the angels or whatever, they were orchestrating it. And I was like the puppet that now had the voice. And but I learned so much from them, all of the newbies.
Now, eventually, Cub certainly has been instrumental in search and reunion. I've been aware how many individuals have been able to get the support that they've needed, the courage that they've needed to go back and find their missing pizzas. Are there folks in Cub who specialize in search and reunion, or does that vary from place to place?
Something that we wouldn't allow our members to do, and when we first started.
Now tell me about that.
Well, we thought it was really important that people get their shit together first.
Okay.
And that they find out what it is that they want, what it is the adoptee experience is, that to become as knowledgeable as possible, so that they wouldn't be floored and their kid wouldn't be floored about the birth parents coming out of the woodwork so many years, in most cases, after the fact. How's that? I don't know if I answered that.
Well, today I know that they do. There must have been a shift at some point in the national dialogue with Cub, because I know now they are very supportive of that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we supported, if that's something that they wanted to do, and they had a way to do it that didn't put Cub's name in jeopardy, because we wanted to be able to work with the status quo, at least at that time. Okay. We hadn't become jaded. I was still hopeful.
You also did a wonderful newsletter.
We did do a newsletter. I don't know if you're aware of it, but all of the publications that we put out there, between 1976 and 1984, when I was with Cub president, we collected them again.
Oh,
We got all of the newsletters, we got all of the booklets, we got all of that stuff again, and it is on a avenue in Cub. Online, you can access their history channel.
okay.
And all of those newsletters are available. And people were wonderful about going into their attics and going into their basements where all of this stuff was and sending them to me. By then I was living in Florida, sending them to me, and we sat around and put everything together, sent it to Cub. Actually, Harvard wanted me to send them their stuff because they have a project that they call Women Activists.
Oh,
Yeah. So they wanted to put all our stuff in their Women Activists channel. And so that's what we did. We collected it all. We gave it to Harvard. We then sent the originals to Cub, and they were digitized, and they were put on the website. That's not well known.
no, I never heard of that. What a great resource. That's fabulous.
It is, and it's too bad that more people don't know that exists. Now, my friend Gail Hansen, now Gail Perry, was my right hand throughout this whole thing. I couldn't have done squat without Gail. And she was one of the early readers of my post in the confidential chat section. She said she never bought a Sunday paper from the Boston Globe before, but she was inspired to pick up that paper, and then she saw that thing, and she hadn't talked.
So there was no problem with your children that you raised from birth integrating an older brother?
No, that's one of the things that Michael says from time to time. He thanks Scott, who was the next in line, for stepping down and making a space. I think there was probably always that space. And something Scott perhaps intuited or felt from me, or all my boys are so affectionate and so loving that they just probably thought, well, here's somebody else. And what they said was, can we play baseball with them? When I first told their brother. Yeah, so I have known Michael for a very long time. He has been a part of our family for a very long time, 45 years. And it's been an amazing situation.
How did you find each other, Lee?
I had someone who knew how to search the records in Boston. And she offered it to me, and I turned it down. I said, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I didn't trust myself. I didn't know what I would do if I had access to him. And I wanted it to be good for him. So I just needed to do my homework. I needed to talk with a lot of other adoptees. I need to read everything I could. I needed to talk to BJ on the back deck of her house in Truro until I had sore throat. I mean, there was so much work for me to do before I made contact. So I followed his life from a distance. In a way, I was a stalker. I mean, I subscribed to their local paper, hoping that he would do something notable. And I went to his city, and I went to the place where he worked. And I just had to gather as much information and check all my senses, because I couldn't trust anything except for my senses, which had been so denigrated all those years before. Mm-hmm. So I made contact with him with his adoptive parents, actually. And I mentioned before, and adoptive mother who was a part of Cub early on. Her name was Carol Gustafson. She's now deceased. She begged me to let her write a letter to Michael's mother. And I wasn't ready. And I said, no, I got more work to do. And so finally I said, okay, go ahead, go send the letter. And so she wrote to the adoptive parents, and then they contacted me. And then I met with them in a living room of my sister's house. My sister put a turkey on there so it would smell like Thanksgiving, and
Yeah.
had that whole family scent thing going. And then Michael's adoptive mother and father, who are now both deceased, had to take their newfound knowledge of me, the person, and not me, the scary mother, and made the offer to Michael. And Michael said that the thing that really turned him was that I had other sons. He wanted to be a big brother. He was an only child.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And he used to beg his parents to go adopt another one, so that he could be the older child. But of course they didn't. But then Scott and Todd were in the wings. And now since then, I've had another child who is born in 1985. I never remember their ages. I have to do the math on it. And Michael and Jeffrey, my youngest one, perceive themselves as my bookends. They are so much alike, it's scary. And then Scott and Todd are in the middle. They're the books. On the bookend.
And his birth father's also involved.
Yep.
So you've really put all the pieces back together in your journey of life and created an organization that can help others to wake up, find the words, assemble their pieces, and learn to be wise enough to perhaps reintegrate those lost pieces without harming other folks in the process. I mean, that's quite a doing, Lee. I mean, that's really something.
It really was. And to my knowledge, Michael and I were the first, or he was the first adolescent to meet his birth mother. Wow. So I may have had information from those who were older, who met their birth parents, but I didn't know anybody else who had met their 15-year-old or 14-year-old or 13-year-old, because I knew who he was for 4 years before my homework took 4 years. So I forgot where I was going to go with that. I don't remember where I was going to go with that, Sharon.
Well, you were talking about maybe he's the first adolescent to have had a.
I didn't have knowledge of that. For example, at our reunion, we were all sitting around the table, and I couldn't stop staring at him. And there was a part of me that was saying, why didn't anybody tell me I wouldn't be able to stop staring at him? Uh-huh. So I took out my sunglasses and put my sunglasses on, because I was sure that if it didn't make Michael uncomfortable, it would make his adoptive parents uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of things that were unique to him being an adolescent under the roof of his adoptive parents, right. That I had to feel my way around.
Your sensitivity and caution is so commendable. It's something so important for people to hear.
I didn't want to screw it up again.
Yeah. Again, isn't that interesting? Again, that piece that you did something wrong right at the beginning.
And I knew it when it was all going on. I mean, it took me 3 months to surrender, Michael.
Yeah.
Finally. And it was a very tricky thing.
Where was he for 3 months, Lee?
He was in foster care.
Did you get to see him during those 3 months?
I did. I told the social worker who wasn't going to volunteer, but I said, maybe if I see him one more time, I will know what I'm supposed to do. So she made arrangements for me to go to the foster mother and see Michael there. Of course, he has no memory of that. He was just an infant. The thing that's really funny is the name Michael. When he was born, he was only 5.5 pounds, and they let him stay with me in the hospital bed. So I fed him and talked to him and bonded with him and all that other wonderful, wonderful stuff. And I said, you know what? I put him another name, my father's name and his birth father's name on the birth certificate, but it didn't, neither one of those names fit him. So I looked at him and I said, who do you look like? What is your name? And the name Michael came to mind. So all the years he wasn't known to me, he had the name that had come to my mind. And his adoptive parents were going to name him Gregory.
Oh,
but they looked at him and they said, no, he looks like a Michael.
oh, for goodness sakes. Oh my. Those are the things that send chills up my back.
I know, they're all goosebumply, aren't they?
They are. So let me go ahead, Lee.
No, it just still amazes me.
I have to say that over the years, I've certainly experienced those coincidences as being more common than people would think. People who vacationed in the same spot every summer as their kids and found out about it later, or just a variety of things that always have struck me. It's the hand of fate plays large in so much of this.
Absolutely. Let me tell you one more weird and amazing thing. After I met with Michael's adoptive mother, and she said, can you come up next weekend? We'd like to physically introduce you to Michael. So my husband and I and our 2 boys got in a car and we drove 3 hours from Cape Cod, where we were then living, to Keene, New Hampshire, where he was then living as a 15-year-old under the roof of his parents. And my husband, we were listening to the radio, as you might do on a long trip. And I wasn't paying much attention to the radio. My husband turned to me and he said, are you a witch? I said, what are you talking about? He said, listen to this. And it was Simon and Garfunkel's Mother and Child reunion.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Oh, Lee, that's amazing.
Yeah. And when I connected the dots on it, I looked up and there was the sign that said, welcome to Keene, New Hampshire. You know, it was like, who orchestrated that?
Oh my.
Who did that? How did that happen?
That's amazing. Beautiful story. Before we end, I want to reflect on something with you. Today, statistically, the numbers of children that are placed for adoption as newborns, at least up until now, have been a small percentage. The majority of children placed into adoption today are coming out of the foster care system.
Yeah.
And which doesn't diminish the feelings of the parents who are losing them to the courts, the shame that they feel of being deemed insufficient parents. I mean, all of the feelings I still feel are connected to the feelings you talked about. But they aren't folks who join groups. Their shame keeps them from coming together, but they're in great need of companionship and healing. They're not showing up at cub meetings. And of course, we have a whole other group of birth parents who are in very open adoptions, who are never separated from the knowledge of where their children are. However, they have feelings too. I mean, as a proponent of openness, I have to say that it hasn't solved all the problems for sure. So the question is, what do you see the role of an organization like Cub in the future? How will we wrap in the new kinds of birth families that are out there?
Well, they have to be ready to come forward. And if they aren't ready to come forward, then I don't know what we can do about pushing them in this direction, in any direction. They need to be made aware of us. They need to be aware of our work. They need to hear the stories. What you're doing is so important. They need to know they're not alone. But the step where they actually connect with other birth parents and make something of that connection, go to repeated meetings, ask questions. That is something that has to come in its own time.
Okay.
And if they're not ready, it's not their own time yet. But the thing that I've been astounded, and so have others, and they've told me this too, is that it gets worse over time. It doesn't get
what gets worse?
The loss, the longing, the pain, the needing to do something about it. They need to emerge whole. It gets more compelling. The pain gets more worse over time, no matter what they've done, even if they've had a reunion. It's like, why do I still feel this pain? I've done everything I can do. It's a very sharp pain and a very sharp loss. And I think if they are cut off at the beginning, it's very hard to reclaim those parts of themselves. Okay. And you're right about the shame. I mean, the shame is so pronounced. You know, about those open adoption people, that was something we worked very hard on in Cub, that people would be able to know each other like always. So it wouldn't be this scary kind of situation that they were bridging. I should have had some supper because I'm losing my thought. And I have so many thoughts. That's the problem, that are coming in. Remind me what we were talking about, Sharon.
We were talking about the open adoption.
Oh, yeah. Very hard for it. So when I came back to do some more work with Cub after I was getting ready to retire as a professor at a local college, oh God, I lost it again.
Open adoption.
Yeah. All right. So I was stunned and so sad that it hadn't worked out the way that we had hoped that it would. One big happy family. And I suppose I was asking for too much. But what killed me was that some adoptive parents, I don't know if it's many, there's no research on this. A lot of people didn't, they connected, a lot of prospective adoptive parents courted the birth mother, told them what they wanted to hear, and made all these promises, and then never followed through.
Yeah, it's one of my heartbreaks too.
That's so painful to know that with the best of intentions, we had worked so hard and we believed that adoptive parents were good people and they would never do this. And probably most of them are, and probably most of them don't do this. But for the ones that does, I mean, that is the ultimate betrayal.
Yes.
Because they lied to your face.
Right.
You know, the prospective adoptive parents lied to their face, saying, we will do this for you and we will do that for you. And we will never not have you in our lives. And I don't know if they had always planned that they were going to do a bait and switch on that. I don't know if it happened later in their relationships. I don't know why these adoptive parents, who probably are otherwise very honorable people, how they could do that. It's very horrible to think about.
It's fear. It's the community saying you don't really have to do this. There's no law to support it. It's my child's 3 now, and he understands who this person is, and I'm not comfortable. It's all of those things which, if we were doing our job of proper education, proper screening, proper support, wouldn't happen. But unfortunately, open adoptions for a period of time became the carrot. So just tell them that you'll do an open adoption and they'll pick you, and then you can do whatever you want to do when the adoption's finalized.
Right.
Yes, we've seen quite a bit of that. It's tragic for somebody like me who's written about open adoption, who has advocated for it. I'm much more apt to say now, be careful. It's better than not. It's better for a child not to have to lose a family, to gain a family, to gain permanency. But man, it isn't easy. It's a tricky marriage. There's a lot of personalities and complexity involved. You're going to need a lot of support. And if you're not willing to do that, then you ought not to choose to adopt, period. But
You know, as the model, and probably you do too, but the person social worker I've been probably most impressed with, and maybe because I've known him longer than BJ Lifton or Annette or Ruben or Jim Gritter.
Yeah, Jim and I are good friends. I used to speak at.
I remember speaking at one of his conferences, and an adoptive parent came up to me and grabbed both my hands and looked me in the eye, and she said, "We wanted to have an open adoption, and we did everything we could to include the birth mother." So Jim has the magic empathy muscle builder, but she won't answer my letter. So the reverse can and has been true. Yes. That some birth mothers, having touched the hot burner, don't want to go back there, or maybe they need a time to figure out what happened and go on and then integrate. Maybe too raw for some of them. But I remember this particular woman, she just said, "I don't know how to get, what can you tell me? How can I coax that birth mother to be a part of our family?" So there's a whole lot of work still to do.
Because there's no perfect marriage and there's no perfect adoption, and they're very much alike. I have to tell you, I know we have to end. I could talk to you for hours, Lee. I can't tell you how precious it is for me to have this dialogue with you. I hope we can stay in touch because it's important to me, and I wish you well in your health. And thank you for everything that you've done in our field.
Thank you, and thank you for your interest and your love and your inspiration, and for picking up that torch that we lit so many decades ago.
Honey, I've been at it as long as you. I'm in my 80s. I'm also retired. I picked it up, now I'm putting it down, but I didn't want to lose your voices along the way. So thank you for this, really, very much.
You are so welcome, and thank you for inviting me.